A little bit during her victory lap yesterday in an interview about the GOP tax bill. She caused not a little confusion with these comments.
I'm really looking forward to doing a lot of traveling in April when people realize the effect that this has, both on the process of filling out their taxes. The vast majority will be doing so on a single postcard, but also having experienced the relief that will be starting as early as February.
What, a postcard? Chief Business Correspondent Christine Roman's here to fact check a little bit and clarify. No postcards.
No postcard this year. Ivanka mixing up her dates a little bit here. The new tax bill won't affect the taxes that you are filing on April 17th of this year. That doesn't happen this year. That tax return is for 2017, so it still falls under the current tax code bill. So when do the new rules kick in? They kick in January 1st this year. That'll affect your 2018 tax returns, which you file in April 2019. Are you following me? Ivanka also mentioned briefly there's relief in February, and that is true. That is when you're going to start to see the IRS adjusting taxes on your paycheck, withholding less money. Now, she did later clarify. She clarified her comments on Twitter when someone pointed out her mistake. She wrote that in April, Americans will be thinking about how cumbersome the old tax code is and energized about upcoming simplification. But filing your taxes on a postcard, definitely not happening this year, maybe unlikely next year too, because the tax bill is not the simplification that GOP leaders promised. There are still a lot of credits and deductions to sort through. However, there are some things that you can do right now to lower your tax bill for next year, like prepay your property taxes. This is for high tax states, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, California. The tax bill caps the SALT deduction at $10,000. So if you prepay this year, you can deduct them under the old rules for 2017. Check with your local tax office, though, and see if you can pay right now. Some are allowing it, some are not. Also, you can defer any income for next year for lower tax rates, pay any expense that will no longer be tax-free, like work-related expenses and tax prep fees, and make charitable donations ahead of time. You can do this here. If you're so if your tax rate falls next year, your 2017 deductions will be more valuable. Here's an example. A married couple earning $160,000, making a $1,000 donation. They currently have a 28% tax rate, saving $280. Next year, that savings, though, if their rate falls, is only $220. So you get the math there. Now, everyone's tax situation bill is different. So it depends on things like your income, where you live, if you have children, all kinds of variables. CNN has a simple tax calculator that you can use right now. It's live right now to help you on CNNPolitics.com figure out what your tax burden will be, what your change will be for next year. So go to CNNPolitics.com if you want to see what your situation is.
The president said that the new taxes would be so simple, H&R Block would go out of business.
Oh, no, the phones are ringing off the hook.
Yeah, they talk about a boon for accountants everywhere, and a nightmare for all the folks in accounting who take care of your W-4s and all of this. Let's continue this conversation and bring in CNN senior economic analyst, former Trump economic advisor, Stephen Moore. Stephen, good morning. Happy holidays to you.
Good morning. I think what I've learned about this is I want Christine to do my taxes next year.
We all do.
That was a great idea. That was a great idea, Christine. I never thought of that. I'm in a high property tax state, so I'm going to take you up on that.
You call me. You call me.
My 2019 property taxes in 2018, right? I mean, that's a great idea.
I don't think they're going to let you do that, though. Actually, they're not going to let you do that, but they might let you prepay a year.
Stephen, the popularity of this tax cut is nowhere near what you would think it would be. Our latest one, 55% opposed, 45%. You know, Obamacare is more popular than this tax cut. I wonder if it has something to do with the fact that over on the campaign, the president promised this populist message that he was going to go after carried interest loopholes for hedge fund managers who are making a killing. That's still in there. This is a corporate tax cut. Can you admit that?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, one of the chief aims of this when I got started 2 years ago with Donald Trump was to bring our business tax rates down. And you know, we did that in a big way. And that, I think, will add to American competitiveness. So I think that's one of the gems of the plan, is making American businesses more competitive so we can create more jobs here. But look, on this issue of the polls, number one, as someone who worked on the Trump campaign, I don't believe the polls too much after they said that Hillary Clinton was going to win 40 states. But second of all, I think, look, if you look at those polls, it's so interesting. What people think is that their taxes are going to go up under this plan, because a lot of people in the media have been saying that. I've debated some people here on CNN who said, oh, middle-class taxes are going up. They're not going up under this plan. And I do think as people realize what's really happening with this plan, and Christine was right. Starting when are they going to change those withholding tables, Christine?
Starting February.
February or March. Right. Yeah, so that means people will start to feel maybe if another $50 or $100 in their paycheck each month, and I think they're going to like that. Moore's political rule is nobody ever lost an election for cutting taxes, but the graveyard is full of politicians who've raised taxes. So I think it's a good thing for the party and good thing for the country.
The president likes to talk about this being the biggest ever. It's not. I mean, Reagan had the biggest, both tax cut and tax increase. And if you look at that, Obama had 2 tax cuts that were greater than this one. But they also point to companies like AT&T who are promising $1,000 bonuses for 200,000 employees as a gesture that this is working. But there's more motivation there than just...
Well, I mean, there's tax benefits for doing those bonuses right now as opposed to next year for some of these companies. I mean, look, the companies do things when they can afford to do it and when it's good for their own bottom line, and they can afford to do it. Some of these companies that are raising the minimum wage, I think it's so interesting. There's a worker shortage in this country at the moment, right? So raising the minimum wage also behooves them. By the way, I think 20 states, January 1st, their minimum wage is going to rise anyway because the states have voted to do that. So I'm hoping that next year, Bill, is the year of higher wages for people. If we really do have a tight labor market the way they say, wages should start to go up.
Right.
Well, Christine, that was always our objective, when we got started in this. We really did want to orient this towards benefiting middle-class people who haven't had a pay raise in 15 years. Now,
but the middle-class benefits in here are temporary, and I know you think that they'll never let them expire, but the temporary nature of the middle-class tax relief and the permanent nature of the corporate tax relief, it's one of the reasons why I think the polls are so negative about this tax reform, because people say, oh, come on, this was a corporate tax cut vehicle. They put a little bit of temporary relief in for the middle class to sell it the way the president wanted to sell it, but really the focus was on companies.
Well, I was a little bit involved in the decision-making on that. We had to put about a $3 trillion tax cut in a $1.5 trillion box. And the strategy here is we're not dumb. We knew that the things that were most popular with the Democrats was the things like the child credit, the doubling the standard deduction. And so we said, well, let's make those things temporary, because even if the Democrats take over Congress, they'll extend those. And the things Democrats don't like too much, which is cutting the business taxes, let's make those permanent. But I mean, we fully expect that those middle-class tax cuts will be, by the way, that's 7 or 8 years from now. I mean, the world's going to be a different place 7 or 8 years from now. But what I've urged Republicans to do, H.R. 1 in 2018 should be to make all of the tax cuts permanent. One other quick thing. You mentioned the carried interest loophole. I am so frustrated that we did not get rid of that. That was the big hedge fund managers that carried the day here, and it's just frustrating. And I'm with the American people. Why didn't we get rid of the carried interest loophole? They should be taxed at the same rate as everybody else. I don't know if you agree with that, Christine.
A lot of loopholes, and ultimately, the reporting I've seen is it came down to New York Republicans. They know that Wall Street is their bread and butter, and they weren't going to let that loophole close.
Well, a lot of those people are Democrats too. I mean, a lot of those guys on Wall Street are big Democratic contributors as well. But look, it was a flaw in this bill. I think a lot of Republicans are frustrated with it. Christine, you're right. We wanted to clear out a lot more of those loopholes in the tax code, and we weren't able to. We got rid of some of them, but not enough. And maybe that means we'll be talking about a new tax bill next year to clean up that mess.
And maybe then Ivanka can get her postcards. I don't know. Stephen Moore, thank you so much.
Really small print on that postcard. Yeah. That postcard, you're going to have to use like a magnifying glass to be able to read it.
Little mouse print there. Merry Christmas to both of you. Thanks for enlightening us.
You too.
All right. Allison.
All right, Bill. Steve wants to talk about a new tax bill next year. Wow. That's quite a Christmas gift, Steve. Thank you. So, Vice President Pence heaps a lot of praise on President Trump. Listen to this.
I'm deeply humbled as your vice president to be able to be here. Congratulations and thank you. We are making America great again. Thank you, Mr. President. God bless you.
All right, Ginny Mose has something to say about this. She takes a look at the Love Fest. Next.
There's no place like parts unknown for the holidays. And Anthony Bourdain is getting everything he wants on Christmas Eve.
That's a plate full of perfect happiness. Keep drinking.
So a strong showing for Obamacare, despite the Republican effort to kill the program. 8.8 million Americans signing up for coverage in 2018. That is 400,000 fewer than last year. However, the enrollment period was also cut in half. Nearly 2.4 million customers are new to Obamacare. The final numbers are also expected to grow because people hit by hurricanes have until March to sign up.
The face of Papa John's pizza chain is stepping down as CEO. Company founder John Schnatter will leave next month. He created a controversy when he apparently connected slumping sales to NFL players protesting during the national anthem. The company, which is an NFL sponsor, later apologized. Schnatter will remain chairman of Papa John's.
Apple coming clean, admitting that it is slowing down older phones. The tech giant issuing a rare statement explaining it has used software updates to limit the performance of older iPhones that might have battery issues and abruptly shut down. Apple insists that this software, that these updates for the iPhone 6, 6S, and SE, and iPhone 7 are designed to ultimately prolong the battery's lifespans, not to force people to buy new phones. Color me skeptical.
As an aging model of a human being, I have the same software.
Battery slowing down?
I shut down right as soon as the show is over.
There you go.
Vice President Mike Pence just ended his surprise visit to Afghanistan as vice president, but here at home, his constant praise of the president has social media buzzing, and CNN's Jeannie Mose has more.
He may be the vice president, but he is the applauder in chief.
In the history of our country,
Leading the cheering section, practically mouthing along with the president.
are making America great again. You haven't heard that, have you?
At the last cabinet meeting, Vice President Pence outdid himself.
Congratulations and thank you. I want to thank you, Mr. President.
The Washington Post even timed the flattery. Pence praises Trump once every 12 seconds for 3 minutes straight. Then he went outside and did it all over again.
Thank you for your leadership. And thanks to the leadership of this commander-in-chief.
Already said that once.
Thank you for your leadership.
Already said that twice. Twitter snickered. The ritual submission and exaltation is nearly pornographic.
Very impressed.
Along with laughing at his boss's jokes, Mike Pence has perfected the art of the gaze.
Action. He likes action.
The adoring gaze, often accompanied by the nod, nodding almost to the beat of the maestro's gestures.
Of new American jobs.
The VP's gaze is so loyal, so consistent, that it's been compared with love-struck children's characters. There's one name that keeps popping up to describe how Vice President Pence fixes his eyes upon the president. It's Nancy Reagan eyes aimed lovingly at her husband. But a worshipful stare seems wasted when the president forgets you're there.
I want to thank Mike Pence. He is...
A Republican media consultant tweeted wistfully, "I want someone to look at me just once in my life the way Mike Pence looks at Trump." The president picked Pence as his political dance partner. Now Pence has to do it his way. Jeannie Mose, CNN, New York.
Have I told you how amazing this dress is? It is an honor to share a set with a broadcaster of your abilities. I'm trying to top the 15 compliments in 3 minutes. Let's see if I can break Pence's record.
Go on, we have time. Wow. I mean, and just to put a finer point on it, you should go to The Atlantic and read McKay Compton's piece about Mike Pence's history and why he does this.
Yeah.
There's a whole backstory about what this may be, according to Pence's close, some confidants, some old friends,
Right.
about what he's doing there.
There's some motive behind the butter.
There may be.
Yeah. Steve Bannon just gave a revealing interview and shares his feelings about the president, Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, and his own future. It's really something. Stay with us. The Call of Duty.
I listened to a story about a woman that donated
through a website.
San Francisco police officer and Army veteran Anna Cuthbertson hadn't considered organ donation before.
It looks like personal ads, people that need different body parts. The more I looked into it, the more I realized that there wasn't a reason not to.
Instead, on the website, she found a very compelling reason why she should donate her kidney. Joan.
All along, she's been pretty miraculous.
Joan Grialis has kidney disease. For 5 years, she was on a wait list for a new one.
Someone in my kidney support group had heard about matching donors, so I found it online and I enrolled myself there. To my amazement, within an hour, Anna called me.
Joan is about the age that my mother would have been if she was alive. Joan's got kids that are about my age. And I just imagined if I had had my mom back, what would I have done to, how far would I have gone to have kept her?
Cuthbertson sees a correlation between her career in uniform and her desire to give.
I think that my time in law enforcement, my time in the military, I spent trying to make a difference to somebody. This was instant gratification for me.
During the months of testing, the women forged a bond.
Were you at all let down when you found out that she wasn't a match for you?
Yeah, I think she and I would have both liked that very much.
But by being part of a kidney pair donation program, other duos with the same problem were found so that matches could be made among them. In all, 9 people got a new kidney thanks to Anna's generosity.
You bring a good kidney to the table and suddenly a whole list of people are able to get a donation.
It's magical. It's things of which dreams are made and can bring tears to my eyes.
Joan's kidney came from an anonymous man in Southern California, but she considers Anna her donor.
I may not have gotten her kidney, but without her doing what she did, I wouldn't have gotten a kidney either. She has a big heart.
A big heart and a healthy kidney, both of which she willingly shared to help a stranger. Stephanie Elam, CNN.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. The angels among us this week, this wonderful holiday week. That's a great piece.
The heart of a servant, really giving everything.
That's so true. Okay, meanwhile, let's talk about this. The new profile of Steve Bannon, who discusses his role in the White House. He discusses his former boss, President Trump. He discusses what he's doing now, what he wants to do in the future. So one part of this Vanity Fair article that's getting a lot of attention is this passage. Bannon has also remarked on the toll the office has taken on Trump, telling advisors his former boss has lost a step. He's like an 11-year-old child, Bannon joked to a friend in November. Let's bring back in CNN political analyst Josh Green. He is the author of Devil's Bargain, which of course provides key insight into Donald Trump and Steve Bannon and their relationship. Josh, great to have you back. So when you hear in that article that that Bannon thinks the president has lost his step and has the, personality or attention span of an 11-year-old, what have you heard Bannon say on that front?
Well, that rings very true about the way that Bannon speaks about the president when he becomes frustrated, usually not on the record to reporters for a magazine profile. But clearly, Bannon went into the administration in the beginning with high hopes to kind of lead a nationalist rebellion and remake government in Trump's image. And almost from the get-go, the Trump administration went off the rails. And part of the reason for that, Bannon believes, is that Trump could never concentrate on the task at hand, that he was too distracted by Twitter or what have you. And he really didn't have the mental acuity to stay focused on the job of being president. So it's a bit of a shock to see that kind of sentiment in print. But the Vanity Fair profile lays out in wonderful detail, I think, how Bannon really views Trump in the first year of Trump's presidency.
There's some also vicious quotes about Ivanka, a font of bad advice throughout the campaign. And there was one quote in the piece where a White House, a White House official, and you kind of wonder if this is maybe the president himself saying, the president just thinks of Bannon as a guy who works for him, essentially. What is their relationship now since he was fired?
Well, it's better than you'd think for somebody who got fired. I mean, Trump has a long history of staying in touch with and continuing to solicit political advice from former senior staffers that he's fired. This is true of Corey Lewandowski, his first campaign manager. We know that he continued to talk to Paul Manafort, his second campaign manager, for quite a while until he was indicted. And we know that he's been talking to Steve Bannon. I mean, Bannon had been instrumental in convincing Trump to endorse Roy Moore, the Republican Senate candidate down in Alabama, even after these allegations that Moore had molested children. Bannon was a big part, I think, of the pressure campaign to get Trump to come around, to come actually down to the Alabama border to Pensacola, hold a big rally for Moore on the eve of his election, believing that this might make the difference and push Moore to victory. Of course, it didn't. And I'm sure Trump is upset about that, so we don't know how much he's listening to Bannon these days, but certainly they've continued to talk, and Bannon has continued to be an important advisor to the president.
Bannon has talked about his own political aspirations and how they are tied to President Trump's. So here's a portion of the article. It says that Bannon, in October, Bannon called an advisor and said he would consider running for president if Trump doesn't run for re-election in 2020, which Bannon has told people is a realistic possibility. In private conversations since leaving the White House, Bannon said Trump only has a 30% chance of serving out his term, whether he's impeached or removed by the cabinet invoking the 25th Amendment. What? I mean, that's a bombshell. And so why does Bannon think that President Trump isn't long for the office?
Well, if you look at what Bannon has done since he left the White House in August, he has spent all of his time touring around the country and around the world, giving speeches, extolling this vision of nationalism that Trump ran and won on, which is really Bannon's vision more than Trump's. I've been with him at a couple of these rallies. He gets a great reception. He's essentially, Bannon, behaving like a presidential candidate and clearly has a connection with the Trump base of the Republican Party. Now, Bannon has said publicly that he's doing this on Trump's behalf, that he's trying to keep Trump loyal to the ideas that he ran and won on. But as you can see elsewhere in that piece, Bannon is frustrated by the fact that Trump doesn't really believe most of this stuff and isn't willing to stick to it. And so if Trump were to get impeached, or decide not to run again, or to have some kind of a health issue, Bannon has talked about, well, maybe I could step in. These are my ideas after all. I'm the guy who got President Trump elected, Bannon believes, and so why not step into that role if Trump were to vacate it?
With the two men harbor contempt for each other, they can ignite into rage, they can't quit each other, is a line in there, so this will be continued. Joshua, thanks so much for your insight. Merry Christmas.
All right, we're following a lot of news this morning, so let's get right to it.
I hardly know the man. I'm not going to say, I want you to pledge allegiance.
Andrew McCabe testifying behind closed doors that former FBI Director James Comey discussed conversations he had with President Trump.
Our law enforcement became highly politicized. Most Americans just want to see all of this completely removed.
Whenever it seems as if Mueller is getting closer to the White House, it seems that we're distracted to something else.
How would you react if the president took steps to get rid of Robert Mueller?
He's not. I've talked to the president. He's not.
This vote will make a difference on how Americans look at the UN.
I do think the United States needs to continue to promote this idea of a two-state solution.
We will not be intimidated.
Israel completely rejects this preposterous resolution. Jerusalem is our capital.
This is New Day with Chris Cuomo and Allison Camerata.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to your new day. It is Friday, December 22nd, 8 o'clock in the East. Chris is off. Bill Weir joins me. We're very close to the holiday weekend.
Getting into the spirit.
Very.
Yeah.
A lot of Christmas music playing in here. So in about 2 hours, President Trump himself will head to Mar-a-Lago for Christmas, but he could sign the Republican tax plan into law before then. Despite that big legislative win and a government shutdown having been averted, the cloud of Russia does still linger. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi sent a letter to Speaker Paul Ryan warning the Speaker not to allow the House's Russia investigation to shut down.
And heading into the new year, tensions are reportedly erupting inside the White House over the administration's strategy for the midterms. The New York Times reports a heated exchange broke out at an Oval Office meeting of the president's top advisors earlier this week. Let us discuss now with CNN political analysts Jonathan Martin and Josh Green. Good morning, gentlemen. To see both of you. Welcome back, Josh. So let's talk about the latest on the FBI deputy director seeming to corroborate James Comey's testimony that the president asked for that loyalty pledge, perhaps part of obstruction of justice. Jonathan, what are you hearing on this front?
That the Democrats are obviously, very, very optimistic that this is going to be something that could lead them to political riches in 2018. That you now have the deputy at the FBI corroborating what the former FBI director himself has said and has written, by the way, I should add, contemporaneously. This is just going to keep the pressure on the Republicans going into next year, and it's going to continue to keep questions alive about what the president does if there are further indictments from Mr. Mueller, and whether or not he pardons people or ultimately fires Mueller.
And Josh, I mean, look, I take Jonathan's point that this is, they think, political hay for them, the Democrats, but it's hard to know where that political maneuvering stops and where their true anxiety starts about what President Trump might do to Robert Mueller, how they might impugn the entire investigation. So Nancy Pelosi just sent this letter to Speaker Paul Ryan about if they have any plans to try to shut down the Russia investigation. Here's an excerpt from it. Democrats are deeply concerned by the majority's efforts to curtail the House Intelligence Committee's investigation and its overall failure to address Russia's meddling in the 2016 election. We expect that you will take urgent action to ensue this investigation can continue and justice can be pursued unhindered. I mean, I think that they sound a little concerned, and they've told us that, taking a break for Christmas, anything could happen while they're gone.
Well, sure. I mean, let's remember, there are multiple investigations going on here. The letter from Pelosi to Ryan was meant specifically to try and put pressure on Republicans in Congress not to shut down that investigation. Trump himself has been pressuring Republican lawmakers, saying, can't you hurry this up? Can't you shut this down? Our Democrats in Congress want to make sure that that doesn't happen. Now, separately, Republicans have also been trying to tarnish the image of Bob Mueller, the special counsel, Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe, who sat for 9 hours of testimony, and from what I hear was highly criticized by Republicans. So this is kind of an all-fronts effort among Republicans to push back against these encroaching investigations. And then on the flip side of that coin, you have Democrats insisting that these investigations not fall prey to partisanship and be shut down just because they're inconvenient or unwanted in the White House.
On the other side, you've got also people like Rand Paul calling for an investigation into Obama officials, likening it to Watergate, worse than Watergate, he said there. And Jerry Nadler rallying against this kind of talk. Let's listen to him yesterday talk about this other call for an investigation.
This hearing is part of an ongoing Republican attempt to divert attention. It's just an attempt to part of the attempt to divert attention from the real investigation into the collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. And the subject matter is frivolous.
He says, Devin Nunes, Jonathan admits it's not a secret they're investigating the Department of Justice. How big is this going to get?
I think it'll get as big as the Republicans in Congress want it to get, and they're obviously being encouraged by President Trump. I know for a fact that he's personally encouraged lawmakers to raise questions about the FBI's conduct and to look at allegations surrounding Hillary Clinton from last year. So, look, the Republicans in Congress increasingly are more loyal to Trump. Because he is basically signing their agenda into law, and he is somebody who they now feel more obliged to help out. And so, yeah, they are trying to do what they can to raise questions about the investigators. Look, there is no question that there are questions to be asked about the conduct of the FBI, but there is certainly an effort that is going on here to in politics, you basically muddy the waters, and I think we're seeing that happening right now.
So listen, the president just tweeted, and it's relevant because
oh boy,
this is your Christmas present, Jonathan,
exactly.
to you.
Early, yeah.
It's relevant because it does shed some light on what his top priorities will be for 2018 and what he thinks that his legislative agenda could be. So here it is. At some point, and for the good of the country, I predict we will start working with the Democrats in a bipartisan fashion. Infrastructure would be the perfect place to start. After having foolishly spent $7 trillion in the Middle East, it is time to start rebuilding our country. So people had wondered what his first order of business would be in the new year. Infrastructure is a bipartisan effort, or certainly a wish list. So that's...
But this is the question, Allison, that I think everybody in Washington has been asking now for the last year, is why didn't he start his administration with infrastructure instead of trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which created so many headaches for him over the course of this year? He would have been in a much different political place today had he started with infrastructure.
Okay, but I mean, now he's course correcting. Now he's starting the new year, it sounds like, with infrastructure.
Well, because Paul Ryan doesn't want to do that. Because Paul Ryan, who's probably in his last year in Congress, wants to focus on welfare reform and entitlements, and he has no interest in a massive deficit-financed infrastructure plan. This is going to cause real tension between the House, Senate, and the White House. Paul Ryan does not want to do this. Mitch McConnell, I think, is more open to it going into this election year, but this is not a Ryan priority at all. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, but there's another reason why this isn't going to happen as the first thing of the new year, and that is because Congress just punted an entire laundry list of things that were supposed to get done by the end of the year, 3 weeks forward to January 19th. When Congress comes back, they have to deal with spending and budget. They have to deal with illegal immigration, the Dreamers. There is an entire laundry list of emergency items that they need to get through, and Democrats have indicated that they are not going to go along willingly, that we could be looking at a debt ceiling breach, a government shutdown, what have you. John is right. If Trump had started with infrastructure right after his election, Democrats were cowed, they were intimidated, they probably would have gone along with it, or some of them would. Flash forward now, and Trump is toxic, he's deeply unpopular, and not only are Democrats not be inclined to cooperate, but most of them would probably be punished by their base if they did go ahead and cooperate. So I think that this is a kind of wishful thinking on Trump's part about what he'd like to have happen. I don't think that it's going to be reflected in reality.
And it's also where Trump generally leans toward, right? The comment in the latter part of that tweet about more money overseas, I think if Trump believes in much of anything, that generally captures it. Why aren't we doing more here at home? Sort of this vague nationalism. And that's where, Bannon leaned towards, too. The issue is that Trump has basically turned over his agenda to conventional small government Republicans in Congress, and certainly in Mike Pence, his vice president, who just don't have the same nationalistic views he does.
Now, I mean, of course, they do have this big legislative win this week with the tax bill, so that has the wind in their sails. And so, Jonathan, I know you have some reporting, however, that there is still anxiety inside the White House about what they're going to do for 2018 and if this is going to be enough to carry them. So what have you learned about the fears there?
Well, look, there is a widely held view in the Republican Party that, yes, it's good that we have a tax cut bill going forward because it's something that we can talk about, but nobody in the party thinks that this is a panacea. They are bracing for a brutal election year. The backlash to the sitting president in the first midterm is usually pretty difficult, and this president, given how unpopular he is, it could be even worse. And I think you're seeing, my colleague Maggie Haberman has a story today. There are real tensions in sort of Trump's orbit and the broader party about how to approach 2018. And by the way, it's only going to get more uncomfortable for the White House because this president is going to face rejection from candidates who don't want to be seen with him next year on the campaign trail. And it's going to be hard for him to stomach that when left and right there are candidates running for office who don't want him to be seen in the same picture.
All right, Jonathan Martin, Josh Green, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Merry Christmas.
Moving on now to breaking news, a CNN exclusive, in fact. New ethics questions are coming to light concerning outgoing Texas Congressman Blake Farenthold. The Republican is already being investigated for sexual misconduct allegations, and he's now facing accusations he may have crossed another line. CNN's MJ Lee is here with the breaking details. Good morning.
Morning. So we are learning new information about the ongoing ethics investigation into Texas Congressman Blake Farenthold. A source tells CNN that Elizabeth Peace, who was Farenthold's former communications director, spoke with the House Ethics Committee last week. They say that Peace told the committee that Farenthold and his chief of staff regularly asked her to perform campaign-related duties, even though she was never paid by or volunteered with his congressional campaign. Now, the source also tells CNN that Peace told the Ethics Committee last week that she sometimes received these campaign-related requests on her official House email and during work hours when she was physically on Capitol Hill, and she sometimes used a House computer to do the campaign work. Now, according to the source, Peace also claimed that on at least one occasion, Farenthold's chief of staff yelled at her to help with campaign efforts and that she tried to express her discomfort, but she felt pressure from Farenthold's chief of staff to do what she was asked. Now, why is this potentially significant? Because there are strict rules prohibiting the use of official congressional resources for campaign or political purposes. So if Peace's allegations to the Ethics Committee are found to be true, that could mean that Farenthold committed campaign finance violations. But I should stress that CNN has not independently confirmed Peace's allegations, and Farenthold's chief of staff and his office did not respond to CNN's request for comment. Peace also declined to comment for the story, but she did confirm that she spoke with the House Ethics Committee lawyers last week.
Where does the ongoing ethics investigation stand with him?
Yeah, well, as you know, the Ethics Committee actually announced yesterday that it is broadening its ongoing investigation into Congressman Farenthold beyond just allegations of sexual harassment. And remember, another former aide, Lauren Green, accused Farenthold of sexual harassment. And now the committee says it is also looking into, quote, allegations that Congressman Farenthold's congressional staff may have used House resources, including staff time, to benefit his congressional campaigns, as well as, quote, allegations that Congressman Farenthold or any person acting on his behalf may have required members of his congressional staff to work on his congressional campaigns. And I should note, Farenthold announced last week that he will not run for re-election next year, and House Speaker Paul Ryan said that he supports that decision, and he has not called on Farenthold to resign.
Okay, we have not heard the end of this, obviously, and thank you for sharing all this new reporting with us. All right, meanwhile, Ambassador Nikki Haley following through on the threat to take names after the 128-9 vote condemning the U.S. decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Haley sent invitations to a reception, and only to the 64 countries that did not vote against the U.S. CNN's senior diplomatic correspondent Michelle Kaczynski is live in Washington with more. What's the latest on this, Michelle?
Hi, Allison. Yeah, so I guess you are disinvited if you voted for this resolution, which would be against the U.S. position. But the party is not just for people who voted against it. It's also for all of those who abstained. There were more than 30 of those. So the U.S. did have some support here. And if you didn't vote at all, you are also invited to this party. So the invite says, this is a reception to thank you for your friendship to the United States. Sounds a little exclusive there, as if you didn't vote the right way, you are not really being thanked for your friendship at this point. And a source who passed on the invite to us said, think of this as just a first symbolic step in the United States taking note, kind of like the taking names, of who supports us and who doesn't. And one foreign diplomat I spoke to who did not vote the way the U.S. would have liked sarcastically responded to this, saying that his team would be crying about this, Allison.
Got it, Michelle. Thank you very much.
I guess the dress code is make them jealous or something like that.
Isn't it always?
We're going to have our own party.
Thanks so much, Michelle.
Well, the Russia probe is expanding. The Senate Intel Committee now looking into other campaigns, including Green Party candidate Jill Stein's. And she will join us next.
Senate Intel Chairman Richard Burr says his committee is examining other 2016 presidential campaigns as part of its Russia probe. One of those campaigns is that of Green Party candidate Jill Stein. Dr. Stein attended a conference hosted by Russia's state television, RT, and sat at a table with Russian President Vladimir Putin and former Trump National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. Joining us now is 2016 Green Party candidate Jill Stein. Dr. Stein, thank you very much for being here.
Great to be with you, Allison.
What is the story behind that photo taken at that state dinner?
The story is pretty straightforward. As you mentioned, I was there for a conference basically on international relations and the role of media, attended by the BBC, by the Canadian Broadcasting System, by the state TV networks for India, China, Telesur, many other countries around the world. It was actually a very interesting conference, and it's all up on the web. You can see exactly what went on. The dinner was really a formality. I was seated at the table with other diplomats, basically, from China, not China, from Germany and from the Czech Republic. And when Vladimir Putin came in very late in the dinner, he was accompanied by 3 or 4 men who I assumed were his bodyguards. I later learned they were not his bodyguards, they were his inner circle. But you never would have known because no one was introduced to anyone. There was no translator. I was able to talk only to the gentleman to my right. The German diplomat was the only person in earshot who spoke English. So, no introductions made. Vladimir Putin went around the table at lightning speed before he left and quickly shook everybody's hand, but no names were exchanged, no words, and that was about it.
And
so
you've never
really,
had any other interactions with Vladimir Putin?
That's right, yes.
So,
nothing in advance and nothing afterwards.
Okay, so if it is as innocuous as you've just laid out, why is the Senate Intel Committee investigating you, and have they talked to you and interviewed you?
They have not. At this point, they have sent us a letter asking for documents, and we are cooperating with that. I take very seriously the issue of interference in our elections, whether by a foreign government, by gangster networks, by oligarchs, and be they foreign or domestic. I think we ought to have a commission on election integrity that addresses the many aspects of interference in our elections. I think that would go a long way to restore the confidence of the American people in our election process.
Do you think that Russia meddled in the 2016 election?
I haven't seen the evidence. I would love to see that evidence to know. I think it would be naive to think that they didn't try. Regrettably, this is sort of the norm now. There are actually hundreds of millions of hacks every day just into the state government of Utah, probably because there's a big NSA center there. But, hacking, as we know from the WannaCry ransomware episode, from Equifax and so on, hacking, regrettably, we are in the Wild West of hacking. I agree with the president of Microsoft, who's actually called for an international conference, a Geneva summit on cyber warfare. I think we need some rules of the road that can be applied across the board.
Well, when you say that you haven't seen the evidence that Russia hacked or that there was Russian meddling, I just yesterday spoke to Senator James Lankford, who talked about he's trying to pass legislation, a bipartisan legislation, because he's on the Intel Committee and the evidence is so overwhelming to him. Let me just read to you what he says here. During the 2016 election, intelligence reports have factually established that Russia hacked presidential campaign accounts, launched cyber attacks against at least 21 state election systems, and attacked a U.S. voting systems software company. So why don't you believe the intel evidence that's been presented?
So, for example, the states of Wisconsin and California have disputed that. They are among those 21 states that have been, alleged to have been hacked. The intelligence agencies themselves said that they assert this, which means that this is their opinion, that they do not have the actual factual information. If they do, perhaps the Intelligence Committee has seen things that the American public has not. And if that's the case, I think we deserve to see it. When we were in a crisis with the Soviet Union back during the Cuban Missile Crisis, President Kennedy declared